Dear Heavenly God, we thank you so much for bringing us here together. We thank you so much for the light that you continue to share with us and for zooming in further and further so we can get a clear understanding of what it is that is our test and what it is that we are supposed to know. It's so important that we understand that so we can pass our test and that we can help others to understand and pass their test as well. Lord, we want to be right with you. We want to be right with the mindset of heaven. We want to be able to go forward and help in the harvest without doing any damage. So we want to be able to understand clearly what it is that you're trying to teach us so we can't do any harm. Lord, time is so close, we know. So we lay our hearts on the table. We ask, please help us to understand fully, to grasp your truth, to be willing to change and grasp the truth that you're giving us, and to hate sin and the hypocrisy that we see around us. But we also ask, Lord, please help us to have peace no matter how much craziness we see around us, knowing that you're here to protect us and that we are going to go forward to the end. Please help us, Lord, to be faithful unto that very end. And we pray that you will help us to understand this message in the review of Guadalupe 6, that all the truths that you have been giving us from the very beginning. And we pray all this in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus. Amen. Okay, so tonight we are going to go over, it's a review, the camp meeting from Guadalupe. I'm pulling it up. Let's see, here we go. Okay, so hopefully, can you see the presentation, Camp Meeting Guadalupe?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so it's called Repetition and Application of History. And again, this was number 6 of the Guadalupe Camp Meeting, done in April of 2019. And although it was a couple of years ago, the Lord's been giving us the truth from the very beginning. So we go back to the basics and we just review, and hopefully this will help us. And I'm gonna try one more time doing the slideshow. If this doesn't work, we're just gonna go right back to this look right here. So I'm gonna try to do the slideshow. So far, I haven't figured it out.
Just hit up slideshow. Why is it not working up there? Hit up on the
because for some reason it goes weird for me. Okay, so I'm clicking on slideshow and then I go from the beginning.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it's gonna work. What do you see? Are you seeing?
Yeah, the circle. Yeah, it's right. It's there.
Oh, okay, sweet. I don't usually maybe because I had it on my second screen this time. Maybe it's gonna work because usually it converts over to the other screen where I don't know, it's the teacher's edition part. Okay, so here we go. Hopefully this works.
Perfect.
Yay.
Yeah,
okay.
You talk about there being the repetition and application, the repeating of it all, the reviewing of it all, because I don't know if we have this drilled into our head. It's getting more and more drilled into my head, so I can only speak for myself. But on the big line, the 144,000, I think it's really critical to understand that what Raphia and Panium were on that big line, that was the increase of knowledge on the Sunday law, and that Panium is the formalization. So in Brazil, prior to this camp meeting, she was teaching, and we went through all those Brazil classes. That's where she was teaching In God We Trust, without fully understanding really why. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so teaching In God We Trust, that became the other structure. So you have the structures of modern Adventism and modern Babylon, modern Israel, sorry, and then the counterfeit, and then Protestantism. And so that started to line everything up. So then so the repetition and application of history. I didn't go back and review this real quick, but I think, is it the one that maybe you looked at it already, the one that shows the grid that has the kings in each of the alpha and omega, where it's a failure, success. I don't know if this is this one, but so that's that concept, though, if you guys remember what I'm talking about, if it's not in this study, that concept of Pyrrhus and his alpha and omega, the failure, success of the, you know, tracing the king of the north and the king of the south in each of those ones, and showing which that in the omega, the king of the north is the victor. Mm-hmm. That concept goes into then those structures that give us the failure, success of each one of those structures, if cool. That helps.
Yes, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, and she was teaching that even before I think she knew the full application of it, understanding.
I think so. I think that's what she said.
She was just going on faith. So she, quite the leader, right? Going on faith. So, okay, so we saw, so this is Elder Tess speaking. We saw in the history of Pyrrhus that it occurs in two parts. In both parts, he is trying to establish an empire. First, the history of Macedonia against Demetrius. Then there is his history in Italy against Rome. We traced his history. Then we considered the king, and we realized that Pyrrhus was a representative of Vladimir Putin, because Pyrrhus represents, these are my words, Pyrrhus represents the king of the south, and Vladimir Putin represents the king of the south. So Pyrrhus was a representative of Vladimir Putin. Okay, back to Elder Tess. Using the succession of kings in the nation of Epirus and the leaders of Russia back in the beginning of the Soviet Union and the falling of Tsar Nicholas, we are able to understand that it's also the history of Stalin. So we tied Pyrrhus with Putin, but we also saw that Putin was first typified by Stalin, and we can see that Stalin covered the history of World War II. So back to my words, so you see that Pyrrhus represents the king of the south in this, this history of the Diadochi Wars, but then Stalin represents the history during World War II, so we have a second witness there, and then Putin represents the king of the south in our time. So you've got the three king of the south in the different histories. Okay, so we went back to Elder Tess. We went back to 1929, where Stalin is finally ready to think outside of his own country. It also marks the rise of Hitler. There is civil war in Spain as it develops into a proxy war between fascism and communism, between Stalin and Hitler. We see that it ends on the 1st of April, 1939 here. It ends in favor of fascism when General Franco takes power. So you can see that these countries are already enemies, the opposite side of two ideologies, communism and fascism. So let's look at these lines real quick. And so we're on the board already. So from presentation number 5, and we can see that it covers the Fourth Diadochi War. We have Cassander in Athens in 317, that would be BC, because it goes to 307. So this is 317 BC. And then you've got 10 years to 307 AD. So from here on, this will be wait, how does that work?
BC.
We're still BC, right? This is all BC. Thank you. Okay. So this is all BC. So we've got 307, Demetrius frees Athens. And then 303, alliance with Demetrius and Pyrrhus. 301 is Ipsus, the Battle of Ipsus, where Seleucus, Cassandra, Lysimachus, the three allies, versus Antigonus and Demetrius. So Demetrius with Pyrrhus. And then we've got Macedonia is divided between probably Demetrius and Pyrrhus, right? And then 291, we've got Pyrrhus invades Thessaly. So that's on the, Rome area. And then 289 to 288, we've got Demetrius invades Epirus. 287, Demetrius, I can't think of what, is that W is in west?
West, but in the east.
Okay.
Pyrrhus was in the west and Lysimachus was in the east.
East, okay, thanks. And then, and right here where I say Thessaly, that was the Rome area, that's where Rome is now, but back then Rome was still really small, right? And so
Thessaly, I think you're thinking of Thurii. Isn't Thessaly part of Greece or whatever?
Yeah, I think you're right. Thessaly is part of Greece. Okay, yeah. So this is the Greece area. Okay, right, thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so here between 287 and 285, we have a Cold War. And then this, all this right here was Macedonia. And then right here in 285, we go to this begins Italy. And then 285, we have subterfuge and sanctions. So the three allies with Rome. And that's where they, where, it was information war kind of, right? Where they were talking bad about the other leader, and I won't get into that. So 282, we have Terran attacks Thurii. 280, Pyrrhus arrives in Terran. Okay, and so that's
Tarentum.
Tarentum.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Tarentum. Okay, so this is the Fourth Diadochi War, Macedonia and Italy. So this is with Pyrrhus, Seleucus, Cassandra, Lysimachus, Demetrius, Antigonus, and then over here we have World War II, right?
Heading into it, not quite, but yeah, the 10 years beforehand was between the Spanish Civil War.
Okay.
And I was going to ask, since you're right at that part, if I could, I don't remember if I asked this on Sabbath or not, because I was thinking about it based on something one of my family put on Facebook, calling us vegan socialists in a roundabout way. But
and that's supposed to be a bad thing?
That's the implication when you really listen to it. But
is it supposed to be a bad thing?
No, being a vegan, no, they were mocking, let's see, they had put a meme up, one of them put a meme up of side by side with the plant-based meat, I don't know, one of the plant-based ones, Beyond Beef or whatever that was, Beyond Burger, and then and all these ingredients, and then on the other side, just like some of us probably would have done several years ago with all the conspiracy stuff, and then beef on the other side with just beef. Is the ingredient beef. And so then they were commenting on it, and my brother actually put on there that that's what we're all going to have to eat when these socialists win, something along those lines. No. So in an indirect way, they all know I'm a vegan, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Indirect way, they're calling vegans. So anyway, so I was thinking, it made me think about how you see back in where you're just going to go through with the proxy war, and you just mentioned it, that it was a fight for communism or over fascism, right? Mm-hmm. Socialism over fascism. And I was thinking about what he said was socialism, and I said, and I'm thinking in my mind, well, then if one side is socialist in our day today, I'm just thinking, I'm always thinking about how to, if there's anything I can say, how to say.
Hey, did you just call me?
But if let's see who
did I call you? I didn't.
If the liberal side is socialist, I don't know, is it right to say what's the opposite of socialist? What would you guys say?
Fascist?
That's what I thought. Maybe somebody else can tell me if that's wrong, but that's what I was getting. And so here they are, mocking the socialists. So if one side is socialist, then what does that make the other side? And it's like, man, people need to think about what they say and what they believe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think they really understand what they believe.
Yeah, I don't think so either. We kind of saw that in the A.T. Jones documents, that they're the ill-informed. I definitely know that when it comes to my family, and I don't mean it in a disrespectful way, but I mean, I know that they're not they're just feeding off of Fox News, you know?
Yep.
And it's really sad because you see the plains of Dura all being, you know, the statue being built up on the plains of Dura, and people are drunk with the wine of Babylon, and they don't know.
Exactly. They just don't even understand what they're saying.
No.
It's sad. Well, and we were that way because we weren't studying.
No, yeah, or at least not like this.
Right, exactly.
To me, a real simple one really early on was, and this has nothing to do with what we're studying here tonight, but just to recognize that we need to think. And people in general need to recognize that they need to think, because Christians, many Christians, and maybe even beyond Christians or whoever believes that, you see the post, oh, I'm so glad, because I see it from my family, that our mom and dad are in heaven now, they're finally together, and the dog's with them and all this other stuff. And it's like, if people, the very least, people believe in the resurrection, right? Yeah. There's a resurrection, and it's like, okay, why don't you put the two of them side by side together? How can there be a resurrection if they're already there? So I was just kind of making the point with the socialism, fascism thing, is that people don't think.
Right.
They don't think. And that's what this bringing two things together, the juxtapositioning, the compare and contrast has taught us. By bringing them together, you see what it is that you just didn't even think about.
Wow. Remember the two lions that we used to always talk about, the two sticks?
The two sticks of Judah and Israel?
Yeah. That when you said that, it just clicked with that, like the whole parallelism with juxtaposition, putting the two together like that. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure it doesn't mean that, but the symbolism there, just, putting the two sticks together, just, I don't know.
Yeah, and putting the resurrection next to your belief that when we die, we go straight to heaven.
Yeah, exactly. Compare and contrast. And
now pick one.
Right, exactly. Yeah, wow. Okay, thank you. Okay. So I wanted to point out this part. Remember, on a lot of our lines, there's always that 10-year prior to where the line starts. And so you can see this dotted line here, and then there's another dotted line here, the 10-year. So it continues with that same pattern, like all of our reform lines, where there was something going on that 10 years before the line starts that should have clued us into what was coming. And so, on this line for the beginning of the World Wars, we've got 1929, we're starting the Great Depression. We've got the proxy, April 1, 1939, we've got the Spanish Civil War, August 23, 1939, we have the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, non-aggression, spheres of influence, trade and payment, September 1, 1939. Oh, remind me what these stand for. Almost probably
Britain, France, and Poland.
Poland, yep. Okay, so Britain, France, Poland versus Germany, and the USSR coming in to help, right?
Supporting. Yeah, they were allies at that time.
Yeah.
They were enemies, natural enemies, that everyone was shocked and knew what was coming when they allied together for that.
Exactly. And then, see, this is the Europe divided, August 1949.
1940, yeah.
1940, sorry, thanks. 1940. We've got...
that was the invasion of Poland, wasn't it, you guys? August 1940, was that the invasion of Poland? Because then Operation Barbarossa happens afterwards. Right,
that makes sense, yeah.
They squabbled, I think, between 39 and 40, and over the divisions of Europe and what they were going to divvy up, because they had made that pact, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, right? And then between September and August, there was a breakdown in their in their little relationship. And and then they sorted out their differences, and then Hitler went and invaded Poland.
Right, exactly. Cool, thank you. Then June 22, 1941, we have Operation Barbarossa. 1945, Germany against the USA, USSR, West and East.
Germany had to fight on both fronts.
Sides, right? So they were fighting on two fronts: the west side and the west front and the east front. Then you have Cold War, and then 1989 to 91, we have subterfuge, sanctions. 2014, Russia, Putin attacks Ukraine. And so you notice that these two lines line up. We've got the 10 years here, 10 years there. We've got, let's see, I know that they fit, but I don't remember all the connections exactly. So you've got the three allies here on the, at the Battle of Ipsus. We have the three allies here in 1939. You've got the divide, Macedonia divided, Europe divided, and Pyrrhus invades Sicily right here. Is it Hitler?
You should say Hitler invades Poland, yeah.
Poland. You've got Demetrius invades Epirus. You've got the Operation Barbarossa, that was with Hitler, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got the two, for Demetrius, he's fighting on two fronts, the Western front with Pyrrhus, the Eastern front with Lysimachus. Germany's fighting on two fronts, USA and USSR for 285 BC, and then 1989, you've got subterfuge and sanctions. You've got Tarentum attacks Thury, and then on 2014, Russia and Putin attacks Ukraine.
Which is really important. Maybe somebody else understands it a lot better than I do, but I was talking a little bit to Larry, because we know that Russia is building up massive troops on the Ukrainian border. And what he reminded me of that I forgot was that we didn't put sanctions on Russia in 2014 when they did that, and should have, and now they will. So we have to know these things because we're literally in Panium, and this is the Panium involves the King of the North and the King of the South. So and I don't know if anybody else saw too, I don't know how significant it is, but I think it is that he made a bunch of agreements and whatever you want to call it, pacts with India as well. When it comes to arms and things, there were several things involved. So
I didn't catch that. So Biden or Putin?
No, Putin.
Putin made.
And he's building himself up from what it seems to be to a fall.
Okay.
That's what I think. And maybe somebody else understands that better.
Well, that's where it's supposed to go, right? Right. So David puts on there thank you, David. For September 1st, 1939, German forces under the control of Adolf Hitler bombard Poland on land and from the air. World War II had begun. Thank you.
You're welcome. Google.
Good friend.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions on these two lines and how they line up and the histories? All of this was covered in the previous things, but if you have questions, we can answer those here. Anybody?
We're doing good for now so far.
Yeah, okay. So next page. So, but they surprised the world a few months later when they go into an alliance. Wait, let me go back because so we're talking. I'll reread this paragraph because I went over here, and then this paragraph is going to continue on. So there's civil war in Spain as it develops into a proxy war because between fascism and communism, between Stalin and Hitler. We see that it ends on the 1st of April, 1939, It ends in favor of fascism when General Franco takes power. So you can see that these countries are already enemies, opposite sides of two ideologies, communism and fascism.
Yeah, Hitler and Stalin.
Yeah, Hitler and Stalin.
Yeah, okay.
And then, but they surprised the world a few months later when they go into an alliance. So when the Western world, particularly Britain and France, heard about this alliance, everyone knew that this was for the purpose of World War II. And they already started evacuating their cities, such as London, and preparing for war because this pact heralded war. That war began on the 1st of September, 8 days later, when Hitler invaded Poland. World War II began. As this pact stipulated, Eastern Europe was divided between Hitler and Stalin. We see that their relationship was strained because of this division and also because of a disagreement over trade and Hitler's payment for the services of the Soviet Union. This will become important where we make up application. So of course, you guys always know that if you have any questions along the way, just stop me. And otherwise I'll just keep going, okay? Okay, so they sorted out their differences, Hitler and Stalin. Their alliance became strong again, but it was temporary. Hitler decided that he was ready for war on the East, and he attacked his ally on the 22nd of June, 1941. The largest invasion known in history, Operation Barbarossa. This drove Stalin into an alliance with the Allies, which he'd originally backed Hitler against in September 1939. In 1945, Germany is defeated. Hitler is defeated. It's divided into East and West by the United States and the Soviet Union. This sparked the Cold War between those two powers that lasted until 1989 to 91. This is sanctions and subterfuge. And we can say that's the end of that history. Okay, and then we drew a line. So a few years ago, we would have taken this Cold War, we would have talked about Reagan and John Paul II, the United States and the papacy, and an alliance. And we would have said that this was successful, that the king of the South was defeated, Daniel 11:40 is fulfilled, and that the king of the South is removed from prophetic history. Now we know that this isn't true, that this 1989-91 was just marking the end of one story, but there is an omega history. We see that in Italy, right here. So this is where, go on to the next history. Okay, so what happened in this history between Reagan and John Paul II? We're going to go over it again later in our studies. Was that success? Was John Paul II successful in what he wanted to accomplish? I'm going to say no, it was failure. What John Paul II wanted was to defeat the Soviet Union and free Eastern Europe, particularly Poland, from the control of the King of the South. He was able to do that, go that far. But what he really wanted was for those Eastern European countries to choose the papacy, at least as their moral leadership. And he wanted a Catholic revival across Eastern Europe. In that endeavor, he failed. And he knew that particularly from the fall of the Soviet Union, he failed in that endeavor. So we don't often talk about John Paul II after 1991, and that he was an angry pope because he saw this as failure. Eastern Europe did not want another dictatorship, and they would not look to the papacy or their priest as their leaders, whether it was birth control, which was for him a big issue, and all these different issues. Eastern Europe chose the United States, their liberal economy and way of living after years of oppression. They were not going to choose a moral authority that was as oppressive as the papacy, even though they were Catholics themselves. John Paul II was a conservative Catholic. What he wanted for Eastern Europe was not accomplished. So this was partly successful, partly failure. The papacy did not come out of 1989-91 with what they wanted to come out with. The King of the South was able to return. We began to trace that. What we want to do is take Pyrrhus's history in Italy and look at what it can teach us. We talked about 1991. There was one particular country that twice turns to the West. First, at the same date as the end of the Cold War, that was Ukraine. They chose the West over communism. But we come to the history of 2014, and there is an issue inside Ukraine. That issue is that there are two separate factions. What do those two factions want? One faction wants to ally with the West, with the United States, and another faction wants to stay allied to the traditional master or boss, Russia. Previous to 2014, a leader comes to power, Viktor Yanukovych, right? He wins the election, Viktor Yanukovych, promising Ukraine that he is going to ally them to the West. And he's open to the idea that many people want that of joining the NATO alliance. Yanukovych is promising to bring Ukraine into another alliance with the West. But in 2013, Yanukovych drops the act because that was a pretense. He made it very clear that he was going to draw Ukraine back into an alliance with Russia, rejecting the West. 2013, that sparked protests known as Euromaidan? Euromaidan? Is that right? Euromaidan?
Yeah, I think so.
Yanukovych was removed from power. Where did he flee? He fled into Russia, and he lived there protected by the Russian government ever since. In 2014, he removed from power. In 2014, he is removed from power, and the majority of the people in Ukraine choose to ally with the West. And they place a government in power that's allies to the West. Because remember, there are two factions. The side that wants to ally with the West, particularly with NATO, and the United States wins. They remove Yanukovych. What was Russia's response? They attacked Ukraine. That situation is still ongoing. Just like Thury, Ukraine is now permanently dependent on the West.
Well, that's kind of interesting to where that she puts that, and this is 2 years ago, that it's still ongoing because we don't have that. Oh yeah, you do have it up here. Let me see which one it was. When, what am I trying to think? When, because Pyrrhus, let's see, Thury actually goes on for a while. And I think that's what she's mentioning, right? Yeah, like Thury. Because Thury goes on for a little while, but then it says Tarentum though. Let's see. So it's just like Thury. It was Tarentum, I think, that carried on for a little while and then finally falls at the Sunday Law. So this all must, the 2019 now must still, I mean, not 2019, but 2021. It involves what is happening with Ukraine still, because that whole issue with Ukraine has continued to exist, and now he's built up around the borders. So I know that has something to do with all of this and the fall of the King of the South.
Right.
Or the deadly wound.
the timing. God made sure that this one came about the same time.
Yeah.
So here's what they were talking about back here. You're a maiden. So 2013, that sparked protests known as You're a Maiden, right? And then here, this we probably got from Wikipedia, maybe? Okay.
Wikipedia.
So You're a Maiden is literally European Square was a wave of demonstrations and civil unrest in Ukraine, which began on the night of 21st November 2013 with public protest in Maidan Zelezon-Osti. I apologize. I'm not very good.
We'll totally leave you alone on those.
Okay, with pronunciations. I apologize to anyone who speaks Russian because I'm really bad about.
Be able to help you.
So Lana, jump in if you want.
I guess it doesn't matter, but it says Майдан Незалежности, Незалежности, but it doesn't matter. I mean, you guys, however you can pronounce.
Oh, please forgive me. So that's a common, a name for that we say is Independence Square. Okay, so in Kiev, so that's all in Kiev then. So the protests were sparked by the Ukrainian government's decision to suspend the signing of an association agreement with the European Union, instead choosing closer ties to Russia and the Eurasian Economic Union. The scope of the protest soon widened with calls for the resignation of President Viktor Yanukovych and his government. The protests were fueled by the perception of widespread government corruption, abuse of power, and violation of human rights in Ukraine.
And keep this in mind as well with what went on with Trump, with and I can't think, maybe somebody, Zelensky, was that his name, Zelensky?
With the phone call?
And how they accused him of corruption and all that. Mm-hmm. I think it's Yanukovych. He's the one, if anybody watched the videos at the time, when we were studying this before, he's the one that they all went into his home. He left and he fled to Russia, and they all went in and they did this video on everything in the gold and everything else that was in his house, and just totally disgusted with all the poor people. I don't know if anybody remembers that video.
Yeah.
The whole issue of trying to get the battle there between some that want to side with Russia and some that want to side with the West, and they ousted him and brought in Zelensky, and he sided with the West. So Russia is still wanting to pull Ukraine back to his sphere of influence. Okay.
Right. Wow. Thank you.
And if I'm wrong in any of that, some of you that are better at understanding these things than me, I'm not, the war stuff is like, goes over my head, but that's what I remember of it.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, the war stuff has always been hard for me. So many moving parts.
Yeah.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes,
please.
This is something that that I heard from my mom, because I was already here, and it's interesting that people in the former Soviet Union area are very uninformed, like misinformed, because she said, "Oh, you know what happened? What happened is that turns out to be that." In Ukraine, that in that Maidan, this square, in this Maidan, there was this basically Ukrainians. There is a big uprising of the fascist, neo-fascist Ukrainians, and they slayed basically some Russian people.
Wow.
As a like a tribe against tribe, this kind of against Russians, saying that we don't want any we want a clean Ukraine, we want to, clean blood or something like that. So basically, it was motivated by some neo-fascists that are, considering themselves that they want blood cleansing of the Ukraine, and that's why Putin had to come in and he had to help out the Russians, and this was so prevalent that. And especially that, considering that most of the media is actually government not just government funded, but when Soviet Union fell apart, the main media establishments, they belonged to the government, and that's why the government controlled the narrative to such a degree that when we heard from some people that were down there, acquaintances of the acquaintances in the church, because there were people in the Seventh-day Adventist church that were actually had connection with that, what was happening in that Maidan, and they were saying completely different thing, and that's how there was started the splitting, not to say like officially splitting, but there is a split between the people in Russian people, Seventh-day Adventists, and the Ukrainian origin Seventh-day Adventists, because a lot of Ukrainians that live in Russia, they have, they are still connected to their, have their relatives in Ukraine, and it's kind of a divisive issue, because they were saying a thing that is unheard of, and people really couldn't believe it that well, because it's like, because we all actually know, it's very, very well, known that there is an uprising of neo-fascists in the Western Russia, Ukraine, all the Western part of the former Soviet Union. So when they were saying that this may not how actually happened, there was a lot of, so basically there's a lot of disinformation. People really, a lot of people don't know what's actually going on, and people believe the government. They don't even know that it's like, oh, this is specifically government saying to you, but it's it's the government dominates. Even so, it's not official, the first channel, the called first channel, it's not I guess you can look it up, but it doesn't come to the people's understanding that, well, like I didn't understand for a long time that first channel is actually, the government, owns it and has a hand in it. But but it's just like, I just wanted to make a quick comment about the deep disinformation back home, that people believe that it was guided, this Maidan happenings, the tumult was guided by the neo-fascists, which was obviously disinformation was spread. This information was spread by the Russian sources.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. It's amazing, right?
I know disinformation is so bad. It's extremely hard to talk to, to have a common reality, to share a common reality. That's the problem.
Yeah, they deal with two streams of information, right?
Right. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's good information. Thank you. Let's see, right in here. Abuse of power and violation of human rights in Ukraine. So Transparency International named President Yanukovych as the top example of corruption in the world. The situation escalated after the violent dispersal of protesters on November 30, leading to many more protesters joining. The protests led to the 2014 Ukrainian Revolution. During Euromaidan, there were protests and clashes with police throughout Ukraine, especially at Maidan Central Square in Kiev, which was occupied and barricaded by protesters, along with some administrative buildings, including Kiev City State Administration. On 8th of December, the crowd toppled a Lenin statue nearby. Protests and clashes increased in January after the Ukrainian parliament passed a group of anti-protest laws. Protesters occupied government buildings in many regions of Ukraine. The protests climaxed in mid-February. Riot police advanced towards Maidan and clashed with protesters, but did not fully occupy it. Police and activists fired live and rubber ammunition at multiple locations in Kiev. There was fierce fighting in Kiev on 18th through 20th of February. So there's a list of people killed during that Euromaidan. As a result of these events, the agreement on settlement of political crisis in Ukraine was signed on the 21st of February 2014 by the president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, and the leaders of the parliamentary opposition, Vitaly Klitschko, okay. Arseny Yatsenyuk, Ole Tyanaikbok. No, I think I'm trying to put too many syllables, I think. Tyanaikbok.
Like, I guess it's gonna be hard to pronounce. Oleg
Tanyabok. I think I try to separate it out with too many syllables. Under the mediation of the European Union and the Russian Federation, the signing was witnessed by the foreign ministers of Germany and Poland, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, Radoslaw Sikorski, respectively, and the director of the Continental Europe Department of the French Foreign Ministry, Eric Fournier. Vladimir Lukin, representing Russia, refused to sign the agreement. Shortly after the agreement was signed, Yanukovych and other high government officials fled the country. Protesters gained control of the presidential administration and Yanukovych's private estate. Afterwards, the parliament removed Yanukovych from office, replaced the government with, oh, okay, you already told me this one. No, wait, no, this is different. It's spelled different. Wait, his first name is different.
Alexander, it's like Alexander Turchina.
Oh, this is it. Okay.
It's Ukrainian spelling, Alexander.
Alexander Turchinov, and ordered that former Prime Minister Yulia Timoshenko be released from prison. Events in Kiev were soon followed by the Crimean crisis and pro-Russian unrest in eastern Ukraine. Despite the ousting of Yanukovych, the installation of a new government and the adoption of the Ukraine-European Union Association Agreement's political provision, the protests have sustained pressure on the government to reject Russian influence in Ukraine. And that was all from Wikipedia. Thank you for helping with the translations for the pronunciations of the names. No, thank you. So then we come to 280 BC. We see the king of the south making war preparation of his own country. We need to consider Putin's activity in this history, the preparations that he's been making. You could spread it out over a larger period of time, but his activity is particularly marked in 2016. And as we made application also of the Alpha history, and we talk about what war looks like in our time, we're going to continue to expand and add more layers in what's happening, particularly from 2014 forward. So in 2016, without proving it yet, I'm saying that Putin is establishing control in his own country, expecting war. Part of that preparation in 2016 is setting up his own National Guard, a portion separate to the Russian army that answers only and directly to the president. If we went back to the history of 1989 through 91, how did the King of the South first fall? How is he defeated? We can talk about Reagan and Bush, but when we go to 1989, we pick a date. We talk about the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9th. Where was the United States on November 9th? It wasn't there. Or 1991, it wasn't there. You go through those couple of years' history, and without knowing the buildup to that history, you would have to have a difficult time blaming the United States, because who brought down Gorbachev? Not the United States, but his own people. His own people rose up and brought him down, just like Tsar Nicholas. That is the purpose of the Cold War. What you are doing is undermining, destroying your enemy from the inside, and it's brought down in revolution. We need to consider the beginning of our reform line, our time of the end. What did that look like? And where was the King of the North in 1989 or 1991? Not there, because what happened to the King of the South was destruction from the inside, and Vladimir Putin lived through that history. So he sees as a threat, not just the United States, but his own people. In 2016, he establishes a National Guard, a portion like an army separate to the army of about 400,000 troops, the strongest troops that do not answer to any of his generals, no one in the army. They come directly under his leadership, and the only reason you would need that kind of force is to protect yourself from your own people. So if there is ever a coup attempted or a revolution, as the United States tends to do and is doing in Venezuela, then they try to turn the army against the government. That's what they are trying to do in Venezuela. They can turn the army against the government and the people against the government. They can overthrow the government. That's how the United States has acted in multiple countries. What Putin has done is put up a defense for that. He has set up a 400,000 strong army that does not answer to anyone but him and his loyalists.
I was thinking about Donald Trump. He seems to have developed his own army too.
Yeah.
I guess you would call it a militia army, right?
Yeah. And what I was thinking was, what comes around goes around, eh?
Yeah.
So the United States has been doing this around the world, and now it's going to happen to themselves. Wow.
Yeah. And so many people don't even know it's coming.
Yeah, exactly. So these are both articles. This one's on Putin's private army is in a war with no rules. The mercenaries of the shadowy Wagner group, which has been linked to the president's personal chef, are exporting the Kremlin's brand of brutality and conquest across the globe. This is Roger Boyes. And that's a link to that. And then this one's a link to an article on Putin's private army. Russia is tightening its grip on Africa, but Moscow doesn't want to admit it. So when we go to 2016, we see preparation. Then we come into the history of three battles: Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. We already understand Asculum and Beneventum. We can call them familiar names, Raphia and Panium. We have a date for Raphia that is November 9, 2019. We have already understood that in between Raphia and Panium, you can identify dictatorship between being set up and the desecration of the temple. We have that from other lines of history. So back between Asculum and Beneventum, there was dictatorship and desolation of the temple in Sicily during the Pyrrhic Wars. And we saw it here, the setting up the dictator, you know, and then we're coming up on Panium.
We're in Panium.
Yeah. So a period and a point. So we're in the period part of Panium. So we come to Panium. In this history, it's the king of the north against the king of the south. And in this battle, the king of the north wins. The first victory of the king of the north. So if we're in Panium, but we're not going to the Levite set, or are we?
Right, not yet.
Okay.
But soon.
Okay.
The way it looks. I mean, Panium is supposed to be 2021 and we're coming up on the end. I know if anybody remembers Heraclea, seems like everything seems to happen towards the end of the year. Like you had Raphia was November, right? Heraclea was a period as well, point of period. And I'm trying to, I think it began September and then ended December when, what was the general that quit, the last general that quit? I can't think of his name. And Bolton also left, all of that. I think that was all around, I think that was all December 18, right in there.
Okay.
And so it seems like everything's like at the end, you know what I mean? What was Asculum? Raphia, oh, Raphia, okay. Okay, I was mixing up Heraclea. So Heraclea was definitely 2019, Raphia was November 9. I was just kind of confusing the two. I think I said it right. I confused myself and you guys probably didn't notice.
Good job. So we come to Panium. In this history, it's the king of the north against the king of the south. And in this battle, the king of the north wins.
Well, it's interesting too. The king of the north attacks the king of the south. So we know it's not a hot war, right?
Right.
And he's about to slap sanctions. And like I was saying before, he's about to slap sanctions on Putin that that didn't happen when Putin did this in 2014 in Ukraine.
Exactly. So this will be the first victory for the king of the north.
Now, I might be wrong. These are just the things we're looking at, what has happened historically. So
exactly, right.
Hold out for when she really lays it out, but that's, we're looking at the history and looking at 2014, what happened, and we're looking at we're you know, trying to gain our own, not our own, but you know, have prophetic eyes to see things with by looking at the history, looking at the past to know the future. And what I think is interesting too, that I don't know that this is ready to bring into the mix, but 2014, I think 2012, maybe somebody remembers, when did Arab Spring? That was 2012, I think. So in that history, you have Islam as well.
Right, that's right. Okay. Soon after that, soon after this first victory for the king of the north, soon after that, I'm suggesting from the history of Acts 27 and the line of Pyrrhus, we're going to see a rising up of Rome, 273 BC. Must be this one.
Yes, we'll see Francis start to come on the rise.
Yeah. And we are going to come back and consider this again in a later study. If this is Panium, we've already identified 272 BC as the Sunday law. This one here. So here, the overwhelming flood, the harvest of the world, and the final and complete defeat of the king of the south. He is defeated at Panium, but that is a process. it is finally accomplished at the Sunday law. So this Panium is going to start his defeat, right? So what he's doing right now is going to start his defeat. And then by the Sunday law, he's going to be completely destroyed.
It has to do with his status as a superpower based on his spheres of influence.
Exactly.
So I just want to think out loud for a second. Because this is all to be not this study in particular, but the formalization of the Sunday law, right? Panium is the formalization of the Sunday law. So we see what the right is doing in the US, and it seems as if, I don't know, because think about this. Let me ask the question, what do you guys think on this part? Because we see the rise of Francis, right?
Yeah.
And yet Francis, how did she say it? We just went through that, I think, too. Francis is not in agreement with the right. He's in agreement with Michael Moore, the liberals.
You're talking about Pope Francis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not saying anything because I don't know, but I'm just looking at what we've been looking at in the Uganda presentations, and how, and I think it was in our Manor of the King of the South too, I can't remember, because you have in here the civil war between the right and the left, and it surely seems we're going to see the right swing back, right? We'd have to review the Millerite history on that, but Pope Francis is working with Michael Moore. I don't mean working with, but you know what I mean, that they've talked and that they're in agreement. So Michael Moore is the leader of the Nethinims, and he's talked with the Pope, and but Donald Trump and Pope Francis are not friends. I think what we saw is they need each other for a cause. So it's just interesting because if we think about the players involved, you have in the United States, you have the liberals and the conservatives. That's the, for the King of the North, because who's going to be the state? Maybe, I don't know if anybody's been thinking about this. Who's going to be the state that, if you remember from our previous studies, it's the Protestants that put the papacy back on the throne. But if I understand it correctly, it's not because they're friends. It's not because they unite out of friendliness. And when we read the A.T. Jones documents, it appeared in the A.T. Jones documents it was going to happen as a result of what the right does. So not that they want, because they want to be the mother. We saw that in those documents. They want to be the mother, right? They want to be who she was. But remember when it talked about the voting and how, I just remember a particular passage where somebody was asking, aren't you, a Protestant was asking a Catholic, I think that's who it was, but asking, aren't you worried about, what the Protestants are doing? And he said they weren't going to worry about it at all because there would come the time that they would need us. And when they did, we'd help them and it would be their fall. Right? Everybody remember that? Okay.
Yeah.
So it would cause the fall of at least the Protestants, the conservatives, but it would seem because the liberals are where the hope for the Nethinims is. And so it would almost seem like the liberals unite with Francis, or they are Nethinims and unite with us.
Right.
I think. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
It seems right.
But we'll see as it continues to develop.
Yeah. Did I read this?
Yeah, you did.
I think I read this, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and I just want to, because because you had said that Panium is the formalization to the Sunday law, and I just want to remind people that that is on the 144,000 line.
Right.
That could be confusing, because like Panium on the priest line is the second Advent, right? Raphael was close of probation, but that's on the priest line. But right, when Elaine was talking about Panium being the formalization of the Sunday law, that's on the line of the 144,000.
Right.
Okay, and the Raphael is,
yeah, because for the priests you have 1989, 2001, 2014, 2019, and 2021. That's the line of the priests. So the line of the priests ends at 2021, and it is the 144,000 that come out of that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody was following that. Okay, so so we are left with one battle that is new to our understanding. We bring this to our internal waymarks. We say it's at 2018. This is the Battle of Heraclea, right here. And in this history, it's the King of the North that's going to come against the King of the South. It's a victory for the King of the South. So in 2018, it was the victory for Putin, but the North came against the King of the South.
That was when Trump put in place. If you remember when he first got elected, it was I think it was his first, maybe somebody remembers, his first executive order that he signed, but he put in, it was having to do with internet safety, saying that there hasn't been an overhaul and there was a name for it, an acronym for it, if anybody remembers, but he put that executive order in right away, but then nothing was done with it until then, like in September or maybe earlier, I don't remember, in 2018, where they're getting ready to head into the midterm elections, and they start to go on the offensive. The United States starts going on the offensive rather than the defensive when it came to internet attacks to protect the election. And so he's literally stopping his friend Putin from being able to meddle in the election. And Putin's like, what happened? I thought we were good friends. That's when he talked with Bolton, I think. What happened? I thought we were good friends.
Right, exactly. So Raphael, the King of the South, coming against the King of the North. Who is it a victory for? The King of the South. So we are marking and tracing our battles in history 2018, 2019, and Panium. At Panium, the King of the South is defeated. Then he begins to fall progressively until he is finished at the Sunday law. This is the application that we can form from the history of Italy. Pyrrhus is a mega history. What we then need to consider, if we are able to draw it up, is that first alpha history, what that can teach us. It is not going to be so possible to do that in these studies, but if you can keep that in your mind, we're going to bring some of those concepts out and consider it. We can already begin to see how it would overlap.
I don't remember Asculum. Raphael, the King of the South. I don't remember the events there. I don't know if anybody else does for review. David, do you remember?
I remember, didn't Trump like give up some of our spheres of influence also? I mean, it just handed them back over to Russia.
That was when he, that was with the generals. Yeah, when he fired his last general. and was going to pull out all the troops from Syria. Where
didn't he pull out of Afghanistan? Wait,
Yep,
no, not
yeah.
Afghanistan, but yeah.
Yeah, drawing a blank to say the right thing. Okay, so that I don't have it clear in my mind, but yeah, that was when he pulled all the troops out of not Afghanistan.
No, it was something. What was it before that? Shoot. Oh, what was it? Everybody guess I'll know.
My mind at months, and it's hard to keep it all straight.
Wasn't it Syria?
I said Syria, right?
I think it was.
Syria. Well, there was 2 places he was pulling the troops out of.
And Lana says Turkey was involved. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was related to Syria, but the Turkey was kind of a thing between, somehow I remember Syria and Turkey being the...
Mattis, that was the general's name, Mattis.
Okay.
And Bolton, that was when Bolton left. I think I already said some of this. I was remembering it earlier. So that was when Bolton left because of what Trump did.
Yeah, okay.
So it was a loss for the King of the North.
Okay, where did I stop?
I think he went to the bottom. I think.
Did I?
Yeah.
Begin to see how that would overlap. Yeah, okay. I need a new brain.
We all need to review, guys, so feel free to everybody to chime in, please.
Yeah, please.
Because we all need the review, especially as we're in Panium to understand it.
So now we're going with, we're lining up these lines from, so Macedonia and Italy, World War II, and this is the alpha, and then the omega of Pyrrhus. So Macedonia is the alpha of Pyrrhus, Italy is the omega of Pyrrhus, and then we've got World War II is the alpha of our history, and then we have the omega of our history, right?
So we just cut the line, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, so it's like this, right? Only, let's see, where did we cut the line? Somewhere in, right here. So right here is the line, and then there was all that history in front for Macedonia, and then this is all Italy. So we've cut the line, and so now we have Macedonia on its own line, Italy on its own line, World War II on its own line, and then our history.
And lining up the events on each.
Exactly, thank you.
Yeah.
So if we would overlay our lines, we would bring in Pyrrhus in Macedonia. What is the first thing that we're going to notice? There is a 10-year history, a period of 10 leading up to the time of the end. So we know that this is the time of the end on our line. This is the time of the end on World War II, the time of the end on Italy, the time of the end in Macedonia. So there's this 10-year period of history.
I don't know if we refer to it in those other histories, but I don't know. I can't say that for sure.
Right, no, because they're more information lines instead, but so they're not really considered
I don't think so, but I don't know. I can't say for sure. I don't think so.
Right. So I don't think they're really considered the time of the end, but this is where we have it all lined up, because they're not, I think they're more information lines because they're not reform lines for God's people.
Yeah, yeah.
So these, yeah. So these can't be reform lines, but we're lining it up with, because she's lining it up with the time of the end right here. This is our time of the end.
This is a reform line.
Right.
Good call, because I couldn't remember how to say that. Thank you.
Do we have that on our reform line? We marked 10 years leading up to 1989. And what do we call that? So this is the 10 years, and it starts that Afghanistan war, the proxy war in 1979. Okay, and so we marked the 10 years leading up to 1989, and what do we call that? What history is that? The history of a proxy war between the King of the North and the King of the South, and this is Afghanistan. This brings us to 1989. Then when we bring in our history, we went from 1989 to 2014, marking Ukraine. If we were to take it back into this history, we marked this as the time of the end, the period of 10, leading to the end of a proxy war. This is the first waymark. What should we see next? In 2014, an alliance between the King of the North and the King of the South. We already hear talk of the alliance, some type of agreement relationship between Putin and Trump. And if you follow United States news sources, it's been a major subject for about the last 2 to 3 years. So, and this was done in 2019. So the last 2 to 3 years would have been like 2017, 2018, 2019, right? So it's been a major talking point and an investigation, and the work into that is still ongoing, but it has been difficult to prove. I would suggest, based on prophecy, we don't have to wonder what is going on between Putin and Trump, why their behavior is so strange. Based upon the Alpha history, before we come to war like Raphia or Panium, there is first an alliance. We can mark that in 2019. So this is the King of the North and King of the South alliance here. After 2014, we come to 2016. This is where we want to go back and consider our lines. In the history of Pyrrhus in Macedonia, the end of a proxy war in 307 BC, the alliance, 303 BC, where is the alliance utilized? In the Battle of Ipsus, you have the first battle with Antigonus, where Antigonus was defeated by the 3 allies. And so again, you see how all these lines line up. You've got in 1939, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact alliance. In Italy, 282 BC, you have Tarentum attacks 3. That's not, there's an alliance there. And then in 303, you have Pyrrhus and Demetrius in alliance. Okay, so in 2016, this is where the alliance was utilized, and you have the first battle. In our study, we want to break down this battle in the context of the US and US elections and see how that battle was won and what it can teach us. Again, in our Alpha history, we can see a division of spheres of influence. We are going to talk more about that as well, leading to 2018. This is the Battle of Heraclea right here. We'll discuss that as well. Then we come to 2019, Asculum or Raphia, and the Battle of Beneventum, where the King of the South is defeated. So what we learned from this history, when we overlaid this history of our alliance and the first battle where the alliance is utilized in 2016, we call that Ipsus, or we could call it the invasion of Poland. Here, so we have Ipsus, we have this alliance with the 3 allies, we have the invasion of Poland, Antigonus defeats the 3 allies, and Pyrrhus arrives in Tarentum, and then we go on to Heraclea. So I want us to note one particular difference between an alpha and omega history. So this being the alpha, this is omega, this is the alpha, this is the omega. In the history of World War II, who is the King of the North? If we were to draw up our battles, we would talk about Pyrrhus invading Thessaly. Demetrius invades Epirus. Lysimachus and Pyrrhus come against Demetrius. You could call it the invasion of Macedonia. We come to the history of Italy. They're given 3 names: Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum. Then we come to the history of World War II. We can talk about August 1940. This is the first battle or breakdown. This is where they would slide in when we would overlay our lines. We would talk about Operation Barbarossa in 1941, and then we would talk about 1945. These are the descriptions of those battles. Our second and third, we would more traditionally call Raphia and Panium. Just because that is where they were first seen in history. This is Pyrrhus's history and Alpha, and this is an Omega, and this is Pyrrhus. Okay, so this is that chart that Elaine was talking about previously, where it shows the failure and success for the King of the North and the King of the South. And she's going to go over it. So the Alpha, we come down to our history of 2018, 2019, or Raphia and Panium. So when it comes to Pyrrhus in Macedonia, his Alpha history, Pyrrhus invaded Thessaly. Who initiated that conflict? The King of the North or the King of the South? It was the King of the South initiated that conflict, and who won? The King of the North. Demetrius invades Epirus. Who initiates that? The King of the North comes against the King of the South, and who wins? The King of the North. Pyrrhus invades Macedonia. Who initiates that? The King of the South comes against the King of the North, and who wins? The King of the South. So we have two victories for the King of the North, then a victory for the King of the South. That is the Alpha history. In the Omega, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum, who initiated the Battle of Heraclea? The King of the North. The King of the North came against the King of the South. Who won? The King of the South. Asculum, the King of the South initiated it and came against the King of the North. Who won? The King of the South. Beneventum, it was Rome that marched down south. Rome initiated it, but who won? Rome. So in an Alpha history, you have two victories for the King of the North and then a victory for the King of the South. In an Omega history, you have two victories for the King of the South, then a victory for the King of the North. So we'll go over this chart. You've got Epirus being the symbol all the way down, and then Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. IHAB, right? IHAB. Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum. And then we have Pyrrhus for the Alpha, Pyrrhus for the Omega, USSR for the Alpha, Russia for the Omega. So in the Ipsus, we have Ipsus, the King of the North, and the King of South. It doesn't say who won.
No, that was the Ipsus was the
Alliance.
Alliance, yeah.
Okay. So in Ipsus is you have the Alliance, and so for was there no battle there?
I think that one didn't match everything.
Okay. For USSR, you've got Poland, you've got the King of the North and the King of the South in alliance. For Russia, for 2016, that's during the elections, you have the King of the North and the King of the South in an alliance. For Heraclea, Thessaly, the King of the South, Pyrrhus goes against the King of the North and the King of the North wins. For the, I'll just keep going this way. For Ipsus, Asculum in Epirus, the King of the North went against the King of the South and the King of the North won. Beneventum, Macedonia, King of the South comes against the King of the North and the King of the South wins. So you've got the King of the North coming against the King of the South coming against the King of the North. You've got the King of the North wins. The King of the North wins when he comes against the King of the South, and then finally the King of the South wins. So you've got the King of the North, King of the North, King of the South.
So in a Alpha history, the King of the South wins. It's a failure for the King of the North. Alpha history, it's a failure for the King of the North. At the end. 3 battles.
Yes.
That end in a victory for the King of the South in an Alpha history.
Mm-hmm. And then in the Omega history, it's the king of the south winds, king of the south winds, and then the king of the north winds. So it's a success for the king of the north, right?
Right, 3 battles. And so the Omega histories, it's a 3 battle. There's always 3 battles, but in the Omega history, the difference between the 2 is you switch them. In the Alpha, the king of the south winds, and in the Omega, the king of the north winds. That's why we know that in our history that the king of the north wins and the king of the south receives his deadly wound.
Exactly. Okay. And so you can see how in the Pyrrhus and the USSR, these 2 line up, where you've got the king of the south coming against the king of the north wins. King of the south comes against the king of the north wins. In a Pyrrhus, the king of the north comes against the king of the south wins. Barbarossa, king of the north, comes against king of the south wins. Macedonia, king of the south, comes against the king of the north wins. In Germany, king of the south comes against king of the north wins. So you've got, for both the Alpha histories, you've got a win for the king of the north, final king of the south. In USSR, it's again the Alpha, win for the king of the north, king of the south. But in the Omega history, it's going to be king of the south, king of the north, king of the south, king of the north. Does everybody see the pattern?
Yeah, I hope everybody does see that, because I remember when we were first learning this, I was so confused.
Yeah, me too. And I've had
confused it all.
Yeah.
Speak up.
I've had to go over it so many times before I could see the pattern. It just so much activity, so many different variables.
Yeah, and if we trace it from where we began, at least in these studies, this review, it started with Acts 27. And when she got to the 273, that led her to look at the history, 273 BC, where she found Pyrrhus, and then found that Pyrrhus was a history that was in between the death of Alexander the Great and the time in which you get to the 2 generals, the four generals. And so Daniel doesn't mark any of that history. He would have discarded it as noise. But in our history, it becomes relevant because out of it comes all these battles. You see Pyrrhus in Macedonia, the Alpha history, and Pyrrhus in Rome, the Omega history, that brought us to then World War I and World War II to show us for World War II in particular here, to show us an Alpha history and an Omega history. So that brought us all to the failure, success as well, that comes up as well. So all of these things brought in elements, is that the right way? Concepts?
Layers. layers
that continue to stack on one another. Wheels within wheels, layers,
Yeah. But yours was right too. Concepts, perspectives.
That have been guiding the lines to, if we follow the lines, then we'll be safe. Always following the lines, we will be safe. Believing in the lines. It's remember also in Acts 27 where when you got to Euroclydon or Euroclydon, however you say it, and the ship was damaged, right? And what did they do to hold that ship together?
The lines.
Yeah, the undergirding of the ship was the lines. So the lines are what holds the ship, which represents the United States and Adventism, the institutions. The lines hold it together till you get to Sunday law.
Amen. Okay, so continuing on with this this diagram, and like I said, if you have any questions, just say something, speak up. Okay. So the Alpha come to the World War II. So that is in here, August of 1940. Who initiated that? That was the King of the South, the Soviet Union, cut off their trade with Germany. We haven't described what the outcome of that was. Without going into that history, we are saying that it was a victory for the King of the North. Because of their negotiations in that time period, it was Germany that ended up much better off. In Operation Barbarossa, who comes against who? The King of the North comes against the King of the South. And this was, at least at its inception, victory for Germany. Stalin was taken by surprise. Hitler was able to take a vast majority of the country before Stalin even realized what was going on. But the tide turns, and at the end of the final invasion, it's the King of the South that invades Germany. It's a victory for the King of the South in 1945.
And that ended the World War II, right? And then thus began the Cold War.
Yes. Yeah. So our omega histories and our alpha histories are subtly different. We have to not trace just the similarities, but all the differences. The differences can also teach us. They can teach us because we're using the methodology of compare and contrast. We have shown how they compare. They teach us of a 10-year history, of a proxy war, and an alliance. But we can also learn from their contrast, because their contrast also form a pattern. What we can see is that in an alpha history, the King of the South and the King of the North are switched, not only in who wins each battle, but who initiates each conflict. The alpha history for both Pyrrhus and the King of the South, and our history, the Soviet Union and Russia, the alpha histories match. The alpha of Pyrrhus and the alpha of the Soviet Union, victory for the King of the North, victory for the King of the North, victory for King of the South. So she's like pointing at these things as she goes along.
Yeah.
And yeah. And okay, so that was in the alpha history, the Pyrrhus, the alpha of the Soviet Union, victory for the King of the North, victory for the King of the North, victory for King of the South, initiated by the King of the South, initiated by the King of the North, and initiated by the King of the South. It's a direct pattern. So we take the omega histories, we come to 2018, we see conflict initiated by the King of the North, won by the King of the South. We are going to discuss what that looked like. We come to Raphia. We already know that the King of the South comes to the King of the North. It's a victory for Russia. We come to Panium. It's the King of the North now coming against the King of the South. That is victorious, the King of the North. This is how we contrast using parables. We are learning about an alliance and another battle, but also there is a difference. And this becomes important when we start talking about the true and the counterfeit. In 1945 is the Battle of Panium. And what is 1945 for the King of the North? It's failure. So Panium, okay, in 1945, that was this one. So if we thought about the counterfeit, talking about the King of the North, the papacy, in this history of an alpha, does it end in a failure or success? A failure, WW2 alpha history, failure. So this ends up failure for the King of the North, right? Failure for Pyrrhus in the alpha history. An alpha history is always a history of failure, because if it was a history of success, there is no need for an omega. If in 1945 Hitler would have won, there would be no need for the papacy to have an alliance with the United States. So while an alpha history is one of failure, an omega history is one of success. we need to make sure that we accept that, because the implications are serious when we start considering how we apply Millerite history. When we start applying dates like 1844, we talk about snow, we talk about 1886 and 1888, and we make application. We need to understand parables because we are so used to comparing, we don't know how we use parable. We don't know how to follow, I'm sorry, I'm not saying this sentence right. Because we are so used to comparing, we don't follow how we use parables. We forget there's contrast, and we try to bring everything into our history. So I just wanted to point out just real quick. So, and just clarify for myself too, when we talk about failure and success, we're talking about failure and success for the King of the North. Is that correct?
No, we're kind of talking about both. It just depends on which history.
Because right here, Pyrrhus, isn't he the King of the South?
Correct.
Okay, but we're talking about this as being the failure, and right here, the King of the South won.
Right, it's a failure for the King of the North.
Okay, so when we,
yeah,
so that's what I'm saying. So when we,
when
we say that this,
North.
Okay,
yeah.
So this is a failure for the King of the North.
Right.
This is success for the King of the North, failure for King of the North. So that is kind of, it can kind of play a trick with your mind if you're not paying, if you don't understand what that means. So because we're talking about Pyrrhus's history here, but it's a failure for the King of the North.
Right.
Pyrrhus's history, it's a success for the King of the South. No, I'm sorry, for the King of the North. Don't let me get you confused. So we're talking about failure and success based on the King of the North and all of these, not on whose fight it's labeled. Okay, is that clear for everybody? Because that makes it a little bit more confusing.
Don't be afraid if you need to say something, you guys, because everybody's kind of quiet, and I know it can be really complicated. So it's better to go ahead and speak up if you do have any confusion on it.
Yeah. So even though Pyrrhus is the King of the South and he won here, we're talking about failure for the King of the North. And Pyrrhus is the King of the South here. It's success for the King of the North. Okay.
Yeah, the Pyrrhus is just referring to that history. Pyrrhus in Macedonia and then Pyrrhus in Italy.
Yeah.
They probably knew it was supposed to say that. I don't know. I don't remember.
No, I'm sure this is the way it was written, but I just wanted to make sure it was clear in everybody's mind.
What happened to the King of the North after the 3 battles?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Did I read all this?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so if we did that with the counterfeit, because we need to remember that the papacy supported Hitler in World War II, they went into an alliance with Hitler. So if the papacy supported Hitler, that ended in failure. In the Omega history, does the papacy make a mistake in choosing the United States? Is Panium failure to the United States and the papacy? No, it's a complete and total success. We are going to go back over those lines and discuss them in more detail. So we are able to take this first history of Alpha, and it can also teach us about the Omega. And those differences form a pattern where we can learn from them as well.
And if we remember that the King of the North, we saw this in a few different studies, the King of the North comes in 2 parts. It's church and state. So the state is the King of the North, and so is the papacy. So in World War II, Hitler represented the King of the North, and he sided with the papacy, the church, and they were both the King of the North. Mm-hmm. And we know that the papacy is the counterfeit. And then you get to our history, and you have the United States, which is the King of the North, but you also have the papacy, which is the King of the North. So church and state. together, and it's a success for the king of the north, meaning the papacy and the United States.
Protestantism?
What?
Protestantism? Because there's like that whole connection with our president, or, you know, like our past president, and Protestantism.
Yeah, it's kind of,
the daughters.
it's still kind of complicated because, yeah, it's the daughters, but the daughters are controlling the state. But remember that the daughters, how do you say that? Because we know that the papacy resurrects, right? Papacy resurrects, comes back, and then that's when you have the 8th. So yeah, I don't know how all that pans out. That it's kind of the question that's still twisted in my mind to sort out between the liberals and the conservatives. But the daughters are conservative Protestantism, right? And but within the United States, you have Protestantism and the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Church and state within.
Mm-hmm.
But what they do results, what they do in this church-state union within the United States, you know, trying to think of how to say that, what they do with their union leads to the rise of the papacy.
Okay.
And so then the Babylon, the king of the north, the papacy, will take the throne again based on what happens in the United States. Because
Okay.
the daughters, remember, are not the mother. And the mother comes back.
Okay, thank you.
And actually also, if this helps us too, I think, because remember what we learned about the Protestants paying homage to the papacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not in agreement. The Protestants want to be who the papacy was. They want to have that rulership. And we saw how they were even thirsty to persecute heresy, or not persecute, punish heresy to what they believe to be them as the true religion, coming out of that Calvinist thread, by death. So we saw that in the mid 1600s, they already were talking about wanting to do exactly the same thing. The papacy hadn't even received his deadly wound, and they were already talking about that, wanting to punish heresy, anybody that didn't believe and didn't do according to what they believed, that Christ was the true king, and it is a church and state union, even though they say it wasn't, it is. And that's a whole nother study. But what the daughters do with the United States, the church and state union, is what is our downfall that causes then the papacy to rise and the resurrection of the papacy. I hope that made sense. I mean, if anybody has questions, please ask, because we're like in Panium. And if this is still confusing, please ask.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I always forget where I left off.
Sometimes I put my finger on the screen or I leave my mouse there.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm sorry. Oh, there is one, I think there, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
that's what I was thinking of. Okay, thank you. There is one.
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Thank you. There is one other subject to discuss before we close, and that is discussing the story of these battles, because as we can see, we have lined up 3 battles, and it's most easily and simply stated as Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. 3 neat names. So when we discussed Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum, we see that it's 2018, 2019, and Panium. But when we bring in our lines, there is this previous battle, the Battle of Ipsus. Okay, so we're on line we're on slide 26, and I know it's like close to the top of the hour, it's 4 minutes, but we only have 4 more slides, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, five slides.
I'm okay
so,
if everybody else is. You guys?
Yes, go ahead, keep going, thank you.
Okay. So now we are not just discussing 3, now we are discussing 4. What we can do, just to simplify, take the names of our battles, and one of the things we will do probably starting the next time is look at these battles in application. Because we don't have 2, Raphia and Panium, we don't have 3, Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum, we actually have 4, because the story begins with Ipsus, where the first battle, you can have the king of the north and the king of the south in an alliance. We have Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, Beneventum. I always remember it as IHAB, I-H-A-B, IHAB, because otherwise I get them all confused. So what mode of warfare decided the Battle of Ipsus? Elephants. What mode of warfare decided the Battle of Heraclea? Elephants. Asculum, elephants. Beneventum, elephants. And 2016 is the Battle of Ipsus. So we have 2016 here with Ipsus. Heraclea is 2018, Asculum 2019, Beneventum, Panium. What we already have built into our message is 4 battles, 2 of which are already past, and these 2 have the same mode of warfare as we find in Raphia and Panium. And remember that this was presented in April of 2019, and that was before November 9th, 2019. So we present at this time of review have gone through 3 battles, okay? So I just wanted to remind us of that. So when she was saying that we have already have built into our message the 4 battles, 2 of which have already passed. And these 2 have the same mode of warfare as we find in Raphia and Panium.
I want to ask a question. Sorry to cut you off real quick, because we keep talking about Raphia and Panium, and I want to ask if we remember, where did we get Raphia and Panium from? Because we now refer to it as Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum, but where did we get Raphia and Panium from?
I know it was from previous wars, but I couldn't tell you where.
Anybody remember?
Could you repeat the question?
Where did we originally get Raphia and Panium from?
Isn't in the battles of 300, the Daniel, that history that is tucked in between the chapters of Daniel. So it's not in the Daniel, but it's like Daniel skips the 20-year history. Is that it?
I think you're close. Maybe somebody else. Because it is a later history.
So it's a later history after Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum?
Yes, if I remember right. And I think that's what she said. If I remember right, it's later. I might have that part wrong. But does anybody remember where in Daniel those battles are? We can't hardly hear you. Say that again.
Daniel 11, verse 5?
No, not for Raphia and Panium.
Do you know the answer, Elaine?
Yeah. If anybody, this will probably remember, because back in 2016, when we first started, some of us weren't here then. I get that. It's been brought up in different presentations. That's why I was asking if anybody knows or remembers. Because in 2016 is when that opening up came to show us that the King of the South we always thought that the King of the South was already done away with. And what we found out is that the king of the south was not done away with and does come back. And that's when the whole issue of being said that it was a hot war and the midnight cry comes in and gets our attention and teaches us about the elephants and information war, meaning a new mode of warfare. So the battles of Raphi and Panium were those verses. They were battles between, and I don't remember which ones, but Ptolemy and I want to say Seleucus, I think, of those lines. I think Seleucus, there's another name, but those battles took place in between like Daniel 11 verse 11 and 12 and 13, I think, and then 13 or 14 was these battles between the two kings. So they were completely separate from all of this study, but that's where originally Raphi and the terms Raphi and Panium came in, and then they were all lined up with these battles is here. So 2019 was Raphia, and when you look at the line of the 144,000 that Christine was mentioning earlier, that 2019 was the Battle of Raphia, and 2020, well, at the time I don't think we knew it was 2021, was the Battle of Panium. And what it is the increase of knowledge on the line of the 144,000. It's the increase of knowledge of the Sunday law and the formalization of the Sunday law. So Raphi and Panium came from a previous study, and that we were understanding that the king of the south was not destroyed, but that the king of the south was Russia and going to come back. And but we were still taught wrong, had the wrong understanding that it would be a hot war. So like I said, the midnight cry comes and gives us this, gives us the message of the new mode of warfare, and that was the information warfare. So did that, I don't know, did anybody have any questions on that? Did that make sense the way I said it?
I understood it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I understood it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm keeping notes over here how often I ask if you guys have questions. So I'm going to pull it back when you say, wait. We're trying to engage you to make sure we're all on board and we all understand.
Beautiful illustrations, really nice, these elephants. Yeah.
Yeah, good pictures. So if we want to know what Raphia looks like and what Panium looks like, we already have two witnesses. With the witness of 2 or 3, everything is established.
And that was the elephants.
So just pointing out that they were won the war in every single one of these battles. So by going back to Ipsus, this is what won the war, elephants, and what won the war at every other battle. So she's going to take us back to 2016 on our line so we can see what was winning there. And so understanding 2016 and 2018 teaches us what we need to know about 2019. So we need to go into the Battle of Ipsus, find out how that was fought and what that looks like. We need to go into 2018 and see the relationship between Trump and Putin break apart and then rebuild, and understand what that looks like and what they're fighting over. And then also project that on 2019, because we need to know what we are expecting to see. As Elder Parmenter has said, we misapply history and come looking for a hot war because we haven't understood parables, followed on by the advancing light on methodology that has been advancing now for quite some years. We need to understand parable teaching. It's the foundation of all the histories that Elder Tess has taught, and without that methodology behind it, it would fall apart because we are seeing these battles as parables. So we will discuss Ipsus and Heraclea. We also want to bring in the concept of World War II. in the history of World War II, it's not talking about battles, it's talking about invasions. So now it says 2016 Poland, 2019 is Operation Barbarossa. What do they teach us? World War II brings in another element. So that might be confusing because we were going from, pirates and the elephants, now we're over here in World War II, but she's just trying to bring back like this, a second witness, right? Of how we can figure out what is going to happen on our line based on Ipsos and what happened at the beginning of each of the wars, right? So in World War II brings in another element. What it begins to show us is that the position of the King of the North has location caused him to fight the battle or war on two fronts. It's not all a story of United States against Russia. Now we see it's two fronts. It begins with the West. World War II begins with the Western Front that began in 2016. So when you follow the news, and we really need to be following the news because it becomes important. If you follow the news, you would see the condition inside the United States. More and more division, more and more, it is becoming clearer and clearer that it is in the condition of a civil war. Because what Donald Trump is doing, he is fighting a war, but not against Russia. World War II has already begun in application. We are well into it, but it's fighting the West, his allies, NATO, the Democrats, his own institutions. This is war on the Western Front. So in our own government, the president at that time was fighting our own government. And in 2019, began war on the Eastern Front. We also need to consider that the war on the Eastern Front looked a lot like the war on the Western Front. Other than some change in the viewpoint in World War II, the fronts look the same. It's the same mode of warfare. So the last lesson about what this war looks like, I would suggest that it's built into the story of Pyrrhus and Demetrius. That gives us another thing to consider about what this war looks like. When in this history, did Pyrrhus and Demetrius ever fight? They never fought a single battle. Using politics, they were able to weaken each other, defeat each other, and that without fighting a single battle. When Pyrrhus invaded Thessaly, they never fought. When Demetrius invaded Epirus, they never fought. At their final meeting, there was no battle. So we said that this is a story of the King of the North and the King of the South. I would suggest that it is another witness that it looks different than how we would have expected it in the past. They never openly come against each other on the field. It's worth noting something that we need to look into, that when Demetrius invaded Epirus, Pyrrhus did not defeat a general Pyrrhus did defeat a general of Demetrius in hand-to-hand combat. So he wasn't fighting against Demetrius, he fought against Demetrius's general in hand-to-hand combat. Pyrrhus met a separate army led by a general of Demetrius, and they decided instead of their armies fighting, they would save their armies and fight in a hand-to-hand combat on the field, watched by their armies. Pyrrhus met the general of Demetrius, and Pyrrhus won. He struck him, it's believed, across the neck and across the thigh. He was about to kill him before the men of this general stepped in and saved his life and removed him from that battle. So there is a victory here for the King of the South. We bring that down, and where that fits is over this waymark of Asculum. It is a hand-to-hand combat, not directly with Demetrius, but with one of his generals. This is the only battle that's fought in this history, and it's not with Demetrius directly, but with an ally. What we will begin to do the next time is to start looking at these battles. We want to look at Ipsus, break it down, and see what it teaches us about about the 2016 election. Then we want to come to Heraclea and talk about what happened in 2018. They can give us some understanding of what this war looks like. Another thing we want to do is look at this alliance, what we can learn from 2014. And that is the end of this presentation. And so hopefully, okay, so we have a guest speaker on the Sabbath, but then in the afternoon, instead of doing Isaiah, Linda will be, this is the plan, God willing. Linda will be presenting on Guadalupe number 7 and number 8. So we'll be continuing this line of thought, what she's talking about here is where we'll be continuing this discussion on the Sabbath in the afternoon with Guadalupe 7 and 8. And that's it for today. Thank you for being so patient and letting us go over for 12 minutes. Thank you.
Any questions, anybody?
Thank you so much.
There was a question that was not answered. What part of Daniel are we reading this from? Daniel 11, I mean.
Reading like the history of Pyrrhus with, or do you mean like Raphia and Panium?
The whole history, Ipsus, Heraclea, Esculum, Benevent.
Those histories all come from that history of, let's see, when you go back to the book of Acts, good to hear your voice too, by the way, and I hope you're doing better. We're all praying for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, when she opened up the book of Acts, and all that light opened up, she got to the verse, and I don't remember what verse it is, maybe somebody does off the top of their head, but she got to the verse that talks about how many souls were on board the ship. And it said 276, and she took that 276 and took out Paul, Aristarchus, and Luke. And so therefore there were 273 on the ship, which took her to search 273 in the Bible, which took her back to the Levites, when in the very beginning, when the Levites, is that where you're headed to? Oh, you're in Acts, okay. So she goes back to the beginning. I think it's the book of Numbers, where the Levites, when they were replacing, let me see if I say this right, the firstborn. Yeah, when the Levites, it was when the 2 sons of Aaron were replaced. And I can't remember the story. I'm forgetting the story right now. But his sons died, and you got to go back into that story to see why his sons died. Maybe some of us remember. And then so the Levites were now going to take the place of the firstborn. So it goes through and it winds up, it shows you that when they were replacing, there were, and I don't remember the numbers, but there were so many of the firstborn, and there were so many Levites, and they were 273 short. So she placed that. From there, she goes and then looks into the number 273 to try to find history in 273, and that led her to 273 BC to discover Pyrrhus. And the history of Pyrrhus lies in between the death of Alexander, where Daniel goes from the death of Alexander straight to the 4 generals. So Pyrrhus is in between that history of the death of Alexander, and it's called the Successor Wars, when there was the battle for Alexander's kingdom, and all these different generals fought. And so this history shows all these different generals that fought. But then she finds Pyrrhus in all that history. And from there, she found the history, his history in Macedonia and his history in Italy. And from there, she found all these different battles, and eventually led her to World War II. When she cut the line, put one under the other, led her to World War II, and to give us information for us in World War III. So I hope that answered that, and let me know if it did.
So
basically,
uh-huh.
basically it wasn't from Daniel, right? Because Daniel left out that part because he considered it noise,
right.
And so we're like, God brought us to that point through Acts 27 with the 2, 7, and 3, and he brought us to the histories that we needed to see to be able to recognize what's going on in our history.
Correct. And it led us to understand the elephants, which led us to understand the new mode of warfare, which taught us that because in 2016, what we were learning is that the King of the South was going to attack the United States, that Russia was going to attack the United States in a hot war. And this showed us that it was not a hot war. But yes, what Christine said is it was a history between Alexander the Great and his 4 generals, because Daniel goes from Alexander's death straight to the 4 generals, and he leaves out all that history of all these generals fighting the Successor Wars, fighting over the Alexander's kingdom.
Oh, I start to remember now. This is like 22 years of noise, right?
Right, correct.
Yeah, since the death of Alexander to Antigonus.
Right. And we're going to look at
Antigonus. To the end of Antigonus, I guess.
Yes. And we'll look at more of Antigonus as we go forward and look at the Battle of Ipsus, Heraclea. And I don't remember this one actually covering in detail because of Asculum, because they were not in our time, they were not yet at this time of this study was done, had not happened. But Ipsus and Heraclea, we were already past by the time this study was done.
So this part over here was covering basically the war between the different battles between Demetrius and Pyrrhus.
Pyrrhus, yes,
And then in Italy, they had like 2 more battles, but so the Diadochi Wars are different than this, right?
Yeah, well, the Diadochi Wars were, go back to that, it was the 4th Diadochi Wars where Ipsus is at, I think. The 3rd Diadochi War, 4th Diadochi War, there you go. Ipsus is in the 4th Diadochi War. And then you go into Macedonia and Italy. And this is all that period of time that was the death of Alexander, which was 323, right? And yes. Then you have the Diadochi Wars. And I think we already went through that through last week's study or the week before.
Oh, all right. Now I'm seeing this more like the 2 different periods.
Yes.
The Diadochi Wars ends with the death of Antigonus, right? Then Demetrius. Then is the part that we were covering today is the Demetrius and Pyrrhus.
Right.
Antigonus is no longer in the picture.
Right. Ipsus, I believe. Ipsus.
Yeah.
Is where he's.
Ipsus is when he died.
Right.
Okay.
And we'll look at the Battle of Ipsus. I don't remember if it's 7 or 8 or somewhere coming up. We'll look at the battle. It's probably coming up because it would be first before, but I don't remember the order which she did them in. But so on Sabbath, if all goes according to plan, we might be able to go through 7 and 8, but we're not sure if we're going to get all the way through both of them.
Well, thank you for the clarification.
I mean, it's taken us all a long time, and I know, and that's why I keep asking the question, to make sure you guys all understand it, because it's so important to understand as we're in Panium.
Yes, it's a lot of information, and we have to review it so many times to get a grasp of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's better now that I can see the two different periods, separating the Diadochi words from the words of
Macedonia and Italy.
Macedonia and Italy, specifically Heraclea, Asculum, and Benevent,
Right.
in which stories Antigone is no longer in the picture.
Right, and that was
much.
And she put Ipsus at 2016, and then that one was one of my favorites. I should remember it better, but she uses two different applications, and we'll look at that as she goes through two different applications for Ipsus. But that was the election, the 2016 election, and we'll go through this where you have Alexander the Great and then Antigonus, meaning what did somebody remember what Alexander the Great meant? Alexander meant he was the father. I can't remember what. We'll see it next week. But anyways, Antigonus meant the same thing. But then she goes in and applies it to the battle that went on between the establishment of the United States and the Democrat side representing that establishment, and the death of Antigonus. That was the end of Alexander's kingdom, and the death of, and in 2016 when the Democrats lost, when Hillary lost, that it was the death of the establishment as we know it.
Correct. Yes.
And we'll see that more.
Ipsus is when Trump defeated Hillary Clinton.
Right.
So Antigonus dies right there.
Right.
The Obama legacy dies.
Yeah. And it's the death. She shows it as, I don't remember the word she uses, but the death of comparable. Thank you, Christine. Comparable to his father, or worthy of his father. So, so she marks Hillary Clinton as the establishment of the United States, what it was established on, and it being the death of that establishment of what this nation, when it comes to the Constitution and all that it represents. But we'll see it more on Sabbath, more detail. I'm just remembering some of the pieces off the top of my head.
Very nice studies. Super relevant for the time that we're living right now.
Exactly.
Panium is still scheduled for this year, right? I've been paying attention to the news and see the phone call that yesterday Biden had with Putin.
With Putin, yeah.
And I was suspecting that maybe today, this Putin is gonna retire the troops from Ukraine, because that's gonna be a sign of his defeat. But it's gonna take a little bit longer.
It does take from Panium to Sunday Law, but it begins. The deadly wound begins at Panium, and the death is at Sunday Law.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if you're able to make it on the Sabbath, we'll go through. In the afternoon study, we'll be going through them.
All right. I'll try by all means to be there.
Okay. God bless you.
Same here.
You want to say the prayer?
Me? Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions? We're good. Thank you, guys.
Lord, we thank you for your goodness and your mercy towards us. We're learning how much it was necessary for us to understand, especially in this dispensation, and yet it seems we see a lot of Panium panic that we don't understand all we need to understand. May you forgive us if we have squandered any of our time. And forgive us if we've done anything that is of our own doing to weaken our minds. We also have those that are dealing with health challenges beyond their doing. We just ask you for your mercy and help every one of us that has the sincere heart wanting to make it through this, to serve you, to do the work of the harvest of the Levites and the Nethinims. We ask you to help us and bless us as we try to hold all these concepts in our mind at once, to see the picture, that we could understand the increase of knowledge on the Sunday law. This study of Pyrrhus is just one part of all this. We also have much review to look at the increase of knowledge of the Sunday law, because we're now at the formalization of the Sunday law. So we just ask you to bless us as you lead us and guide us through these reviews, and help us to have the understanding we need. May you continue to increase our skill in rightly using the methodology and understanding how you bring two things together to compare and contrast them so that we can see, and that is what you're doing in the different parts of this world. That's what you're doing here in this nation, bringing these two sides together so that people can see what was once a gray area is now very black and white. May we be filled with your grace and mercy to give us the power to hate sin, and that we would purpose in our hearts to do nothing to defile ourselves, and everything that we can on our part to be ready to harvest the Levites. Lord, help us, please. We are weak and frail, slow of learning, slow of understanding. May the repetition of these studies bring these pictures together fully in our minds. We thank you for your grace and your mercy, your patience, your goodness, your long suffering. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.